Hey, it's John Lee Dumas of EO Fire, and it's the Entrepreneurial You, the show for dedicated and passionate Caribbean entrepreneurs seeking daily inspiration, brought to you by author, speaker, and award-winning entrepreneur Heneka Watkis-Porter. You must be prepared to ignite.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Entrepreneurial You podcast. I am Heneka Watkis-Porter. Well, you know that if you've already been listening week over week. But if you're new here, welcome to our world where we take you through entrepreneurship, leadership. We give you insight, everything that affects the entrepreneurial you, every aspect of that. We're not limited. We're not off limits to anything where entrepreneurship is concerned, right? Of course, we have another insightful and informative episode lined up for you. But first, we've got to thank our sponsor, the Jamaica Stock Exchange. Let's hear from them.
We needed to raise capital, but our experience with local financial institutions was that they were cautious and slow to act, and interest rates were far too high. We had real concerns about financing our business through outside equity investors and the possibility of interference. Could we get a fair valuation for our business? We had our own ideas about the business and its value. Should I go the traditional route of bank financing, or should I try the Jamaica Stock Exchange? So we made a call and experienced transformation of our business through conversations. I'm John Mafood, CEO of Jamaican Teas, and we're listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Give us a call today at 876-967-3271 to begin your transformation through conversation. We want to see your company listed on the Jamaica Stock Exchange.
Welcome back. Today, we are joined by best-selling author of the book, Podcast Made Simple, and the co-host of Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing. After spending 3 years working hard on a degree that wasn't taking him closer to a life he wanted, despite having zero experience in business or podcasting, he dropped out of college to go all in. He burnt the ship on business, where business is concerned. Fast forward today, he's now a 2-time best-selling author and has generated multiple 6 figures with a coaching business, helping podcasters grow and monetize their shows. Welcome, Anthony Nwaneri. So good to have you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here. I'm excited to kind of get stuck in. I've got to say, I love the energy so far, so I'm feeling up for it. Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this. And I'm super excited simply because you are part of my world, the world of podcasting, right? I have the book. It's a podcast power, the quick start guide to launching and leveling up your brand. That's my book. I have you're part of my world, and I'm so excited. But before we delve into your journey, dropping out from college to now a thriving entrepreneur, looking at, podcasting, a best-selling book, and all of those lovely stuff, right? Secrets to podcasting, we're going to get into that. But first, let's break the ice, which is pretty much already broken. But if your life was a podcast title, Anthony, what would it be and why?
That's a fantastic question. It would be, the title would be...
Yes, the title would be...
Working hard, making progress, learning through failure. And learning through failure, that's what it would be.
Working hard, making progress, and learning through failure. Yes. Okay, so I didn't say the name of a podcast. It's a title, so you got it. I love it, and I would listen to that episode. All right. Anthony, I said a little bit a mouthful earlier about you dropping out of college because you realized, this thing is, I'm not doing this thing. I'm delving into business. Let's talk a little bit about that decision. What made you do that?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I was at the point at university. So, I was born in Nigeria originally. And then my mum, a hardworking nurse, and my father, a hardworking nurse as well, decided to, let's move countries from Nigeria to the UK. Big switch and whatnot, right? So for myself, a little young Black African boy from Nigeria, moved to the UK. In the UK, around that time, things were pretty, let's say they weren't as friendly as they are now. So it was a bit tricky, right? But for myself, it was an entirely new opportunity that was opened up to me, whether I knew it or not. So growing up, I kind of always had an entrepreneurial drive, or I didn't know it was called entrepreneurial drive, but I kind of had something in me that was like, hey, I want to do more. And I think that comes from basically me coming from a place of lack or scarcity and realizing, I want a bit more abundance in my life. As I get older, that's what I'm starting to understand. But in terms of kind of, as I went through life, always having this knack of, okay, I want to do something entrepreneur, I want to do something in business. I went through high school, went through the kind of the casual process that most people go through. You go through high school, learn a lot of things, and then decided, hey, you know what? Let me go to university, mainly to buy myself time, to be completely honest. I went to college to buy myself time. I remember the night before I went to college, I sat my best friend down, Kean Scanlon. I said to him, dude, I'll be surprised. I will be blown away if I make it through university. Right. That's what I said to him, because I just kind of knew in the back of my mind. So when I went to university, I was working hard, doing crazy hours, making sure I was actually being productive, making sure I was showing up at work, and making sure I was trying to start loads of different side hustles. I tried, I nearly got into like a pyramid scheme. I tried this thing called, Profit Accumulator, which is a way to make some money online through online gambling. It's not actually gambling, it's just maths. Won't get into it. Not to worry about that. And other different ventures. I even tried drop shipping, which is kind of like have my own e-commerce store. And it got to a point where I was making a couple thousand each month just by doing some online ventures, but I still felt lost. Nothing felt like it was long-term or sustainable. And my time was still heavily caught up in basically working hard in a degree I didn't really like, which was sports science. I remember literally being in my classroom, I say the webinars, and my main goal was either to make money by the person next to me, or I'll be sleeping, so I was never really truly engaged while I was at university, right? And it got to the point where COVID happened. So 2020, I think, March 2020, where I just felt totally lost, to be honest with you. Like I didn't really know where I wanted to go. I was that guy that was always saying, I'm going to do well, I'm going to make an impact. But I was lost. So it was only from basically me feeling totally lost, not sure what I wanted to do. And then finding out what I wanted to do, which was basically after I prayed to God and just said, hey, look, dude, give me anything. I need a sign, no matter what it is, whether that's whether that's me going on, doing door-to-door sales, or that's me becoming a bin man. I don't care what it is. Just give me some direction, because I need a path to follow. Right now, I feel like I've got all this potential, but I don't know where to put it. And that was painful. And I then stumbled across this opportunity known as self-publishing, which is how I got into publishing books through Amazon and KDP. And when I found this opportunity, I decided, hey, let me go all in. So I go all in, I then go back to university after COVID, and now I've got a business that I'm fully all in on, and I've got university, which I'm falling asleep in the lectures on. So it's kind of that dynamic. But the business taught me to be disciplined. I thought I'm going to try to balance the two. I want to make my parents proud. I don't want to feel like they've worked so hard. You know what it's like, having African parents, they really want to push education. Mum want to get rich, education. Mum, I want to drink, education. Mum, I want a girlfriend, education. Doesn't matter what it is, education, right? That was always the answer. So I wanted to kind of try to balance both of these two things. My business that I absolutely loved and knew was going to be what I was setting myself up for. And my degree, because I don't want to just waste all this time away. But I got to a point where I'll wake up at 6, I would walk to the library for half an hour. I would literally work all day to around 5 p.m. I would then take a little break. I would go to the cafeteria down below. So like had a little Starbucks. I would sit in there, open my laptop, and I'd then work till 10. That was my life for the longest time. And it got to a point where I just started feeling like I was working hard on the wrong things. And I was almost like burning away my time. Like I just knew that wasn't what I was meant to be doing in terms of spending most of my time in university degree I didn't love. So it got to a point where I said, you know what? I'm going to have to take a leap of faith, and I'm just going to have to go all in. I actually found a piece of paper that I had wrote in first year of university, which said, by the time I leave university, I want the foundations of a business set up. But somewhere along the way, that got lost in translation. That was my first ever class session where they said to us, what's your goal? And that was my goal. So when I saw that piece of paper, it kind of had all these memories and all these things attached to us, like, should I not? And eventually I stumbled across, again, the mentor who I bought the program off of through publishing. And They went through a similar experience to me. And I know that for them, a couple of years later, after they dropped out of university, being 90% of the way through, it turned out exceptionally well. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to go all in. And funny enough, that the night that I was considering it, I prayed to God once again and asked, dude, I need your help. Show me your way. And he answered by showing me a video of these mentors I had when they were younger, sharing their experience, how they went to university, how their parents were pushing the education, and how they were 90% of the way through university and decided to quit and go all in. Once I had that as an answer from them, from God, I knew. So that's why I dropped out, to pursue something that I knew deep inside I was meant to be here for, and not to spend a second of my time on something I know isn't me. That's why I dropped out of university.
Wow. Isn't that interesting? Because, Anthony, a lot of persons would say, I mean, you're almost there. Why not just complete? But it's like, you have been climbing the wall. Some people have been climbing the wall of success, right? The ladder of success, and only to find that the ladder has been leaned on the wrong wall all along, that's painful. That's painful. So when you recognize before you're all the way to the top of the on that ladder, leaning on the wrong wall, you have taken the guidance from the divine, which is absolutely interesting and necessary, right? You have done that, and it has found you the answer that you seek. You see, whatever we seek, the answer is there. The answer is there waiting just around the corner for us. And many times the answer will not show up until we are ready, because you could have seen that video, and had you not been ready in a mental space to take that decision, to make that decision and to take action on that decision, it would have just been another video that you watched. But thankfully, you watched it and you took action. You mentioned something earlier, Anthony, that stood out. And it wasn't lost on me, because for many of us, growing up in poverty, growing up in lack, and not having enough, for some persons, it is an excuse for them to remain the way they are. While for many of us, it is that fuel that fans the flame, the fire deep within us. So talk to us a little bit, Anthony, about your experience growing up, and a little more on how that propelled you, just knowing that that was not your circumstance. That your circumstance it was, but it was not supposed to be the rest of your life. There was more to life than what you grew up seeing.
Absolutely. I mean, when I moved here when I was around 6, 7, I didn't really know what was going on. I remember when my mother moved here like a year before we did. She came, set a base, set a foundation, and then came back home. And I remember when my mum was leaving, I was crying, weeping, thinking, why's my mum leaving? I think it got to a point where I kind of forgot I had a mum. When you're a kid, 2 days feels like an eternity. So imagine a year. And I didn't really know what was going on. And my mum came back and said, hey, look, we're going to be moving. Again, very young. So I don't really know what was going on. But when I moved here, I remember just feeling kind of like, in terms of, I just felt strange. I felt odd. Even when I was in Nigeria, I kind of felt odd. Like, this is going to sound super weird, but I feel, and again, I say I feel because memories get a bit tainted over time, but I almost feel like I remember when I gained consciousness, like as a little kid, which is very odd to say. So I always felt a bit off, like a bit strange, a bit like I would always think very deep into things. Why was it us? Why was it me? How can my friends have this? Okay, well, why can't I do anything in the world? Oh, I can do anything in the world. Cool. What does that mean? But in terms of how those earlier years shaped me, I would say that my parents have so much to do with it, because they led by example, but more importantly, they never shut me down. They never dulled my dreams. They never limited me. They always said, whatever you set your mind to, you can achieve with hard work and with the grace of God. They'll always say that. I remember one time when I was 8, I was walking to church on a Sunday morning. I remember this clear as day. And again, I always had this drive, as a kid, like, oh, mum, I can't wait to spoil you. I'm going to buy you this Range Rover. I didn't say Range Rover. I had no idea what a Range Rover was. But I said, like, I'm going to buy you a fancy car. And I was like, mum, I'm going to buy you a plane. Not a private jet. I said a plane, right? A plane. And she looked at me and she smirked. She looked down at a little young boy. She smirked, had a little smirk on her face. There's a look in her eye. And she said to me, son, amen. By the grace of God, amen. That will happen. She didn't knock me down. She didn't laugh at me. She didn't say, no, don't be stupid. You know how much that is. She didn't, nothing. She egged me on subconsciously. That's a big goal and big dream I had as a young kid. She didn't shut me down. So now in my mind, I believe it's possible. So for me, that really shaped how much I believed in myself. Those foundational pieces, my parents really showing me again, work hard, keep them on focus, you'll get there.
Amazing stuff. Let's talk about a little bit on Podcast Made Simple.
Yeah, let's do it.
What drew you into podcasting? Let's talk about that.
You know what? I wish I could sit here and be like, you know what? I sat down, I strategized, I saw the trends going up, everything, the stars aligned, I knew exactly it was going to be an absolute rock star and we're going to crush it. The truth is, it was a combination of kind of getting into podcasting, was a combination of dumb luck, and it was a combination of kind of me and my business partner, Tiger Shea, knowing that podcasting was a trending topic and also being interested in it. It was those three combinations. Anything strategic, we had no, we were clueless in business, we're complete amateurs. So getting into podcasting was a combination of those three things, to be honest. That's how I kind of got into podcasting Made Simple. And of course, through the self-publishing side of things. And you're forced to learn a lot through failure, like I mentioned, right at the very start.
All right. So why isn't my podcast growing?
That's a great question. Well, firstly, the answer to that question could be many different things. All right. So if someone asks me, let's say I had a client come in and look, I've been podcasting for 2-3 years and working hard and working long and working consistently and the show's not growing. Right? What the hell? Why isn't it growing? My first question, the first place I will have to look is say, hey, what's your USP? What's your unique selling point? What makes your podcast different to everyone else out there in the market? That's the first thing. That's the foundational piece. Most podcasters believe what they need is more exposure. They need to promote more, create promotional clips, get high profile guests on other podcasts, work on the website SEO, get someone to shout them out, this and that, and blah, 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 blah. None of that stuff matters if you can't retain new listeners and if you can't turn eyeballs who are viewing your podcast already on social media as a guest, who are already seeing your podcast. You can't turn those eyeballs into listeners. And if you haven't got a strategy to retain those listeners long term, all of the effort that you put into promotion, guesting, getting guests on your podcast, getting recommended on newsletters, none of that matters because you're sending hundreds of millions of people to a podcast that can't turn them into a listener and can't keep them coming back for more. So what would I say why podcasting is growing? You're struggling to retain people. You can't keep people coming back for more, and that's an issue.
How do you turn somebody who was just visited into a listener, a raving listener, and keep them coming back for more?
The better question I would say to you, and I want to pose to you, would be, what's your experience on how do you decide what podcast to listen to and what podcast to not?
For me, there are many variables. So when I decide to listen to a podcast, it could be because of a season that I'm in. So some podcasts, it's seasonal. Sometimes I'm in a space where I need to know a lot about what's happening with mental health. Sometimes I'm in a space where it's about money. Sometimes I'm in a space where it's about personal development overall. So for me, podcast listening is seasonal. What keeps me listening to whatever podcast that I'm in that season is how engaging that podcast host is.
Amen.
It's really about how engaged and do I feel like I am part of that conversation? Like, is the podcast host asking the questions that I need answers to?
There you go. So you said two things there. So the first thing you said, which I love, by the way, is a seasonal thing. If I'm going through personal development or maybe I want to get into money, But underneath that, a layer underneath that, there's really two decisions that are driving your need or desire to actually want to listen to a podcast, a specific podcast. Two things. Number one is pain. And pain can be defined of lack. I don't know something. I'm frustrated. I haven't got as much money as I wanted. I'm not the weight that I have. The person I want to be. I feel like I'm overthinking. Pain, problem, number one. Number two, desire. I want to be better. I want to understand how this stuff works in mental health. I want to understand the space. Desire. You listen to podcasts that position themselves as the solutions to your problem or the bridge to the desire you're trying to get to. So you ask me, how do we turn strangers into listeners? If you listen to this right now, this is what you need to do. Even if you're in business, it's not just podcasting, business, life, if you're trying to sell something, you need to position yourself as a solution to someone's problem or the bridge to get them to their desired outcome. To me, I focus on pain because humans were a lot more driven by pain and problems than we are desires. Everyone wants to be rich, but what does everyone hate and just despise? Being completely broke, So that's what you do. But practically speaking, what does that look like, right? Because that sounds good. It sounds fancy. Is what they say, the wow, but what's the how? Your cover art, right? So when I ask you the question of how do you decide what podcast to listen to, there's two elements to that, pain and desire. And the other element is how the podcast is positioned. Their show name, how they communicate their value, what's different about them, what's unique. Their cover art, did it catch your attention? If the cover art looked like absolute garbage, you're not going to click in the first place. You're not going to listen. You won't find out. And at an episode title, speaking to your needs, your pain points, and your desires. If they're not, you ignore them. Why would you listen? You wouldn't. So those are the two elements in combination that help you turn more strangers into listeners.
Amazing stuff. Amazing stuff. And you also co-authored a book. Tell us about that book that you've written, that best-selling book that you've co-authored, right? And talk about what inspired the writing and how has it been going?
Yeah, great question. So, in terms of the name of the book, Podcast Made Simple, on a clear, simple, easy name that people can latch onto, nothing too complicated, but podcasts are made simple, which is for beginners, helping them launch their shows. Of course, now we've evolved to where we specifically help business owners, coaches, and experts in their field grow their podcast that's already launched and then start making money from their podcasts to get a positive ROI. In terms of the writing process and the creation of the book, it was a ton of fun, a massive learning experience for us. It was actually, that was like the second book we had wrote. So we wrote two books at the same time. The first is Every Podcast is the Biggest Hurdle, which was an absolute failure because we didn't understand business and didn't understand that you needed to position a product to solve an actual pain point that the market desires and there's demand for. So that was a huge flop. I remember sitting there with my business partner thinking, we're going to be rich. We're going to be mega. It's going to be insane. The market has never seen a book like this. It's so different. It's so wild. And turns out people didn't want the book. So 0 copies. But then the second book became a bestseller. So in terms of writing that, it was speaking to hundreds of podcasters, interviewing, talking, messaging, going back and forth, doing our own research on Facebook, doing our own research on YouTube, on Google, and then slowly realizing that a lot of the information that you get there are pretty bland and not really as cohesive as you like. So it was a long run-out process of iterating in terms of actually producing the book itself. And then in terms of where we are now, well, that one book has basically allowed us to have the authority, to have the recognition, the brand awareness, to then start working one-on-one with clients. So that's kind of the transition from when we started to where we are kind of at now.
Amazing stuff. I like that. Growing and monetizing your podcast. I know that's not an easy feat at all. That's why one of the reasons I feel so excited, bringing you on, because here we are as, fellow podcasters and stuff. Let's spend a little while just talking about growing and monetizing podcast in general and just some of the, things that we need to be mindful of as we are doing that.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, you tell me, what are you curious to know? Well, where do you want to take this? You tell me.
So for me, it's like, this question I get all the time. How do
Mm,
you monetize your show? How do you get your show to a period to a point where you can actually monetize? People want to pay you money to advertise on your show or whatever it is, whether you're coaching, you're a coach. I am a coach as well, podcast coach. How do you get to that point? I think you've alluded to that in
yeah,
our
for sure.
conversation, but just over little things, but just give us a takeaway on that. What should we really be mindful of as we are growing and wanting to monetize our podcast?
Yeah, I think the thing you should be mindful of is number one, what's the goal and why?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think so what's the goal and why? Why do I ask this? So many business owners have a podcast and it's growing and it's incredible. But oftentimes they, because the need and the urgency to want to monetize, they end up self-sabotaging. They end up promoting way too much, putting people off. They end up having a low retention time. They don't focus on the craft of being a good podcaster and growing a audience. Once you build an audience and build demand and trust and loyalty with your audience, monetization is pretty straightforward. There's two paths you can go down. Sell other people's stuff, advertising, sponsorship, which could be basically the same thing. Basically, just getting sponsors for your podcast, selling other people's stuff, affiliates, blah, blah, blah. Number two, sell your own stuff. My favorite is to sell your own stuff because number one, you get richer. Number two, you have more control. Number three, people want to buy from you, the host, not someone else they don't really know, like, or trust. And number four, you're getting a very, very bad deal when it comes to ads and sponsors because if you think about it, they're paying you to put their product in front of your audience that you spent all this time to build. Then they get most of the profit, and then they give you some change. Here you go. Thanks for that. Nice. Yeah. It's not a great deal from my end. And then the final piece, the bonus one that people don't think about. The CPM, which stands for cost per milli, to get sponsors on your podcast on average is, drumroll, this is insane, by the way. Me and my business partner, when we found this out, we were going absolutely crazy. We could not believe what the hell was happening. Let's say you're a podcaster and you work long and hard and consistently on your show, and you're a business owner, grafting, and you've got your podcast to a point where you're getting, let's say, 5,000 people, individuals, checking out your podcast every single episode. Between me and you, we know that's a good show. If you're getting 5,000 downloads per episode, not per month, per episode, that's amazing. Now imagine you work 3 years for that. And all this time you think, I'm going to get a sponsor. I can't wait to get an advert. And you've done all this hard work. And then the sponsor says to you, awesome. So for every 1,000 listeners you have, I'm going to pay you $25. Silence, right? So that means 25 times 5. Oh no, why have I done this? Now I have to do public maths. I think it's 125. So 125. Come on, I got it right. Yes. You can tell I dropped out of university in college, right? But look, $125 for the episode that you've worked so long and hard for. That's 3 years of work. Like that. That's not that. Like, what's the return on that? It's not very high, right? It's not actually that great. You might get other sponsors who pay you a bigger change, but the issue is if they don't get a return from that, or if it's not perfectly in alignment, you've done us hard work to get a sponsor, they pay you, let's say, $500, but if they don't get a return, they're not going to come back to you. So to me, again, is really focusing on, okay, how do I sell my own stuff to my audience? Do I have a product? Do I have a coaching program? Or do I have merch? I don't really mess with merch, but I'm just saying, if you're a business owner, focus on that. And the question I would ask is, do you actually need the money? Like, does $200 from the podcast change your life? Are you better at being patient and figuring out how to monetize selling your own stuff? Does that make sense? Am I talking nonsense here, or is this making sense?
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. I'm loving your insight on this, Anthony. And I'm going to ask you, I know first I'm going to want to hear more from you, reach out to you. How can my listeners get in touch with you? Where can they find you to work with you?
So you can go, if you're curious, if at this point, if you're listening, you don't think I'm an absolute, arsehole, you think, what, that guy is not, it's okay. And you want to check out our podcast, you can go to While Your Podcast Isn't Growing. on Apple or Spotify, and in terms of like, if you want to work with me directly, I'll let you figure that out. I'll let it be a little bit of a maze, but my main goal is to have you listen to the podcast. If you generally like what you see, amazing. And of course, I have our website, getmorelisteners.com. Again, that's getmorelisteners.com. That's our website. And then while your podcast isn't growing, my biggest recommendation will be a fan favorite episode that we recently did, which was titled 3 Ways to Get Your Podcast More Discoverable. And again, you can go to Why Your Podcast Isn't Growing.
Okay, that is amazing. I've had a great time chatting with you, Anthony. Your insights, your drive, just you sharing with us today. And I know that prior to us coming live, you had mentioned a free copy of one of your books, Podcast Marketing, that our audience will be able to get. So what you can do for us is just share that link, send me that link, and I'll add it to the show notes before we go live.
Absolutely. I'll send that link over to you for you, yeah?
What an inspiring conversation. Again, thank you so much, Anthony Nwaneri, for sharing your journey and your insights. And of course, as usual, to you, our community of listeners, we thank you so much for tuning in. Both Anthony and myself, we are grateful that you chose to spend some time with us today. And you can stay tuned for more interesting episodes of the Entrepreneurial You podcast. And let me just say this, as I always remind you, if you're an aspiring podcaster or a busy entrepreneur, an expert, you're looking to start your own show, but for some reason you just think it's too much work, and it really is a lot of work. So we've got you covered. The Entrepreneurial You Media Production Services, we take you from mere ideation to full-on production. All you pretty much have to do is just show up. Isn't that easy? Show up. So show up and let us do the work for you. And you go shine, shine the spotlight on you as you so rightfully deserve. So visit HenekaWatkis-Porter.com to learn more and to see how we can help you. I can help you to bring your podcasting vision to life. Your voice is unique and the world awaits. Hello. The world awaits to hear your story. So please don't let the thought of, producing a podcast hold you back from having a podcast. You don't need to do that. You just need to show up. It's 2024. Okay? All right. So you can also reach out to me and Heneka Watkis-Porter on social media platforms. I'm pretty much on predominantly the major ones: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, a little bit of Twitter or X, whatever it's called. And there's also a little bit of TikTok, but I'm predominantly on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. All right. So as I leave, I want you to affirm with me today: every challenge is an opportunity to grow. I will keep pushing, keep on believing, and watch my dreams unfold beyond my wildest imagination. Take care.